Okay, so the last video we explained the function of the inset, the lookout, the bevel, and the shoot. And while I was working, I touched on the modifier. Now, the modifier in itself is a very beautiful and a full-blown topic in itself. So that's why I'm going to dedicate this video to the modifier. We won't touch all the modifiers while you work. While you work on different projects, you will begin to know different names of different things. But for now, I will be touching few of the modifier, namely the array modifier, the subdivide modifier, the bevel modifier, and the boolean modifier, Be touching those four, and depending on how much time left, because in less than 20 minutes, I want to think this video should be this video should not span 20 minutes. All right. So the bevel, the bevel, the array modifier, the subdivide modifier, the boolean modifier, and some other modifiers that I can crash into this 20-minute video. All right, let's start. The first one is the bevel modifier. And the bevel modifier is similar to the bevel in the edit mode, but this bevel modifier can be used for primitive objects. You don't have to go into the edit mode to use them, you just need to use the modifier. Now, using the modifier helps you work non-destructively. When you are working in the edit mode, you are working destructively, meaning that when there's a mistake or when there is a correction, you will need to always Ctrl Z back, Ctrl Z back, or you delete and restart. So when you're working on a non-destructive process, what you're doing basically is you're trying to maintain your normal object while improving on it in a more like in an external container. So it's influenced by different drivers, but the foundational structure is not destroyed. Let's just dive into it. So I'll show you. Now, this is a cube. If I add a bevel to this, you'll see that this has changed. But if I increase the bevel and in a way mess it up a bit, now this has changed from the default cube. Now you might think that the cube in itself is lost, but actually if I delete this, it returns back to its original shape. So that's the beauty of working non-destructively. You don't lose your original structure. But the downside is while you are working on this non-destructive pattern, your file gets quite heavy fast. So it's advisable to know when to work non-destructive and when not to work non-destructive. So let's just dive into it. So the first one I showed us is the bevel. Just go click on the wrench here, this panel. You click on this panel, add, and you see bevel. So you can increase it and then add more to it. So this is the amount of how much influence it will have. You can see it, and then this is it. All right. So let's say I'm okay with it like this. Trying to redefine the box to fill. The next one, like I mentioned, is the subdivide. Now the subdivide, if you attempt to smoothen the whole face. Now when you walk, you can see all these weird lines appearing. Now those weird lines are like the face lines, the topology. They are there to show you the structure of what you've done, but there are times when you don't see the structure. You want to give it an organic feel to make it much more realistic, so something much more smooth. So you click on subdivide surface. So the subdivide surface had, you can see when I zoom closer, you can see that this is how it looks like before when I had the subdivide surface. It's as though it added more to it. Now let me increase this. So the more I had, the more surfaces or the more faces I add to my original cube, the more smooth it looks, as you can see. So at level 2, you can still see the line at level 1, level 0. Look at it looks like at level 0. So now all these are you working non-destructively, mind you. So that the subdivide, it helps you smoothing your workflow, your object, just to smoothen the surface. So there are many ways to save, to optimize this process now. At this point, if I'm okay with it, I can just right click and say shade smooth. It gives me a good result while trying to minimize it. So it gives me a new, you can see when I click on shade smooth, it gives me a new modifier, which is the smooth by angle. I create it, it returns back to its normal level. So I go to flatten surface. That looks like when I add smooth surface, it's perfectly smooth. But auto smooth, it gives me the result I need and added a new smooth by angle modifier. Alright. And then I mentioned the last one, which is the bevel. So the last one, which is the boolean. Sorry, I mean the boolean. So I delete these two. So first one is that we touched today is the bevel. The second one is the subdivision model, subdivision. And then the third one we are going to touch now is the bevel. Now the bevel, most of the time we use it when you want to cut through something. It's like an operation of zeros and ones. Zeros and ones. Now looking at this, let's assume I want to put a hole in this area. Let's use, let me use a cylinder, for instance. Yeah, this is a cylinder and bring it forward. We put the cylinder. So scale it down a bit. Control A to apply scale. Scale it in this direction. Yeah, Control A, apply scale. Now I want this cube, let me hide it. I want this cube to have that circular cut. If I click on this, I'll click on the cube, I'll click on the add modifier and I'll type boolean, B-O-O-L. So the boolean, this is the modifier. So it's telling me which object will cut which object. So I'll click on this and select this object. So now it looks as though nothing happened, but what the next thing I need to do is I'll click on this and then I will hide it. So as you can see, there's a hole in the object. That's the beauty of using the boolean. In in a much more dedicated video, I will explain how the boolean works. Yeah, how the boolean works will be explained in much more detail in a separate video. So that's it basically. So if I increase, let's say for example, I click on this, then I move this forward and move forward, and so it is still, you can see it is still inside the cube, but it's not all the way through the cube. If I click on this now and say, let's assume I delete this and say select this, and I hide this, you'll notice that just happened, it didn't cut through the box, but then this is it. So that's the beauty of using boolean. It cuts through your object. So there are some pros and cons to using boolean. For now, that will serve. For now, that will serve. So for the last question you have, this will answer the question. This will answer the question. This will answer the question. All right. So let's proceed. The next modifier is the array modifier. Now the array modifier is quite interesting in that it saves you the headache of duplicating using Shift D. There are three ways to duplicate here. You can use Control C, Control V to duplicate. You can use Shift D to duplicate. You can also use Alt D to also duplicate. Now all these have their uses. They have when you use them and when not to use them. But for now, let's use the array modifier because we're talking about the modifier here. So click on and the array modifier. So in the array modifier, the beautiful thing about it is that whatever correction you make to one, you can make to all. So And then how do you use them? Now you can see one here. This is two, right? It's showing you that we have two counts of the shape, but they are too close to each other, so you can let's increase this factor. If you increase this factor, you have 1, 2. So the first one is your original one, and the second one is the copy. The second one is the copy. So we can have more copies. Have more copies. But let's assume you don't want it to go on the x-axis, you want it to go on the y-axis. If you want it to go on the y-axis only, make sure the x-axis is at 0, and then the y-axis can be at any number you prefer. You can see, either negative y or positive y, you're good to go, depending on the direction you're going for. And then the next thing you need to understand is that while working on the modifier slot, you can apply one modifier more than once. Yeah. Here I'm using one array, but if let's assume I want this guy to still move in the x-axis, but at the same time I don't want to mess it up. If I apply this now, it gives me this weird order. This is nice, but if this is not what I'm going for, it will disrupt my workflow. So I can just apply another modifier, array modifier, and say this time go in the x-axis. Yeah, go in the x-axis. So it maintains the original, like I said in the last video that Blender works from top to bottom. So the first layer defines how the first modifier define how the next modifier will react, which defines how the next one will react. So let's assume let me change something here. On the edit mode, let's use bevel for instance. Instead of using the bevel on the modifier, let's use the destructive bevel, which is this one. And then we had, as you can see, anything you have to add to one, it affects the others. And it's beautiful in itself if you ask me. So whatever you apply to one affects all. So this can be like some kind of weird cube or something. Let me rotate this a bit on the, yeah. So you can see what applies to one applies to all. It's a beautiful thing if you ask me. Okay. So now the next step I want to show us now is that now this array, all this here can be applied. Applied in the sense that now I've created an array, but I want to make it non-destructive. I want to be able to interact on it. So currently now I can only interact on this first one. Let's assume I want to interact on every of these first layer or first level. So what I will do is I'll click on this first one and do Control A. So Control A means apply. Control Z. So this is array, this first one. By press Control A, it applies that first one. And then if I go to my tab, so you have access to all the first row. So I can do all sorts of corrections to the field, make it look different from each other, give it a nice variance as we go and the like. Give it a nice variant as we go. What started as just something close up and like this distance is too much. Let's come back here. Right, let's close it up. Oh, yeah. So that's the beauty of using the modifier. The modifier in itself is quite powerful. If we are going to If you don't want to do, if you are quite confident with the modifier, there's nothing, most things you can be created. Just that you have to, it will take too much power from your PC. So that's why you have to know when to work destructively and when to work non-destructively. Let's delete that. Let's delete all this. If you have any question in the process of this, do well to DM or drop a message. I will make sure I respond. Let's move to the last. Let's move to another modifier. Let's use this time. Let's use a torus. Use a torus instead. Use a torus instead. Control A. Apply. Here. So you will notice that we have all this list. We have the edit, we have the generate, we have the deform, we have the normal, and we have the physics, we have the air. Now all these that you see here are all modifiers. They are all modifiers and different collections. So far we have been using the deform. I've been using some things from the deform. As you can see, this is the deform. You can see the subdiv. So some things from the generate. We have the subsurface division, we have the array, we have the bevel. All what we did so far, we have the bevel, array, boolean, and subdivision surface. They are all of them have been under generate. So let's take something from the deform. Let's say bend here, bend in edit. At the form, let's use mesh the form. Okay, let's bring in something like an icosphere. Let's scale this up a bit. Yeah, and then let's apply this. Control A, apply. Yeah, let's see if this want to deform. So we have here cast the manufacturer. So now depending on what you are actually looking for, your the modifier you will use will be different at every single time. Simple deform. The simple deform you have twist, bend, taper, stretch. Now depending on what, like I was saying before I got carried away, depending on the kind of depending on what you want to create, the kind of modifier you use will change at every point in time. So, for the twist now, you can say that this is affecting 45 degree. I can twist this in a weird way. And X, Y position, Z position, blah blah blah. Then taper, I can also bend it. Now, depending on what you are going for. Now, if I want to bend it on one angle, all I need basically is create a restriction and say only bend on this angle or on that angle, blah 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 blah. So this vectors group, we shall explain it in the near future. For now, let's just have this. So this seems to be the most interesting one. And then all this deformer, have it in mind that this deformer, the more edges you have, the more interesting they have. Let's say for example, let's say for example, let me delete this and apply the plane. Now when I scale this up for yeah, let's control A, scale. So let's go to the tab. You notice that this is just one four cornered space. So if I right click and say subdivide, it gives me this. I can increase this by a lot, by the way. So I increase this and now come back to it. Now we have more faces. So I've increased it. Let me go back to the beginning so we can show you what's going on around here. So we have just one. When I right click and say subdivide, then I increase this by a lot. This is 10. This is 10. I see I've given it more faces. Let me tab out. So you can see that it still looks the same outside, but when I go to the edit mode, it's what will be fine. So let me bring in another plane. Now this plane is the normal one. This one, nothing is applied to this plane. Let me bring it out. Beside it. Now on the surface, looking at it, they look the same. But if I click on the tab edit mode, you can see this one has a lot. This one has just one face. This one has a lot of faces. So let's now apply the deformer to this. Deform, simple deform. Now if I increase this, let's see bend, let's see paper. This. Now look at how this is twisting. Let's now click on this one and add that same deformer to it. And you see the reason why sometimes you need more faces. Now look at this one. So this one is finding it hard to even bend because of there's no face. Now look at this one beside it. See how smooth the bending is. And look at this. When you're working on the deform, the amount of faces you have on the surface goes a long way. So in one of our videos, I'll explain the value of adding more faces. So to add more faces, I showed just one now, which is in the Ctrl Z. Let me add the deformer again. Let's go back and add the deformer. Simple deform. And look at how it looks like. Find it hard. But if I go to the tab edit mode and then select the face, right click and subdivide. Subdivide is me applying. The more faces I apply, the more interesting the curve looks like. So you can see how nice it now looks. All right. So this doesn't stop my creative process. So let's assume I'm okay with this. Let's just assume I'm okay with this. I can then click apply, Ctrl A to apply. Then go back to this, select and extrude. So I can extrude this, and that can continue with that. I can just continue my creative journey or my just keep creating what I had in mind. So that is basically that for now about the modifier. So we touched the bevel, we touched the subdivide, we touched the array, we touched the boolean, we also touched the simple deform. So please go through all this, and if there's any confusion about, or you have need more question, or you are confused about one modifier or the other, just let me know so I can do a video and send it to you. So that's that. You have a wonderful day. See you in the next video.